Have you ever felt a dream burning inside you? A dream so powerful that it calls to you, even when the world says it's impossible. This is the story of one young dreamer who dared to believe, who left everything behind to chase what others said could not be done. He walked roads that seemed endless. He faced storms, hunger, and fear, but his spirit never wavered, his heart never gave up. This is his journey, a journey of hope, of courage, of destiny. If you've ever wondered what it means to truly follow your dreams, this story is for you. Sit back, listen closely, and let the journey begin. Have you ever felt like your dreams were too big for the place you were born? Like the world outside your window was calling your name, but you were stuck in the same old routine? There was a young dreamer who knew that feeling all too well. He lived in a small, quiet town where nothing much ever changed. The days were long, the nights were silent, and the dreams of the people around him were as small as the town itself. But his dreams were different. His dreams stretched far beyond the narrow streets and simple houses. He dreamed of places he had only read about in books. Cities filled with lights, mountains that touched the clouds, and oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. His heart ached for adventure, for discovery, for something more. But in a town like his, dreams like that seemed impossible. His family worked hard just to make ends meet. His father was a carpenter, his hands rough and calloused from years of building things for other people. His mother worked at the local bakery, waking up before the sun to prepare fresh bread for the townspeople. They were good people, kind, hardworking, and practical. They believed in doing what needed to be done, not chasing fantasies. They wanted him to follow in their footsteps, to learn the trade, to settle down, to live a simple, honest life. But he wanted more. He wanted to see the world, to experience things that no one in his town had ever seen. He wanted to build his own destiny, not just follow the path laid out before him. But that dream came with a cost. His family didn't understand. His friends laughed when he talked about it. "Why dream of places you'll never see?" they would ask. "People like us don't get to live those kinds of lives." Their words stung, but they didn't stop him from dreaming. At night, he would sit by his window and look out at the stars. He would close his eyes and imagine what it would be like to walk the busy streets of a big city, to climb mountains so high that the air felt thin, to stand by the ocean and feel the salty breeze on his face. His heart burned with longing and his mind filled with plans. He knew it wouldn't be easy. People didn't just leave this town. They were born here, they lived here, and they died here. It was the way things had always been, but he wanted to change that. He wanted to break the cycle. He wanted to prove that dreams were not just fantasies, they were goals. They were promises he made to himself, promises that he intended to keep. He began to work harder than ever before. He saved every coin he earned, doing odd jobs around town. He fixed fences, he carried supplies, he helped wherever he could. All the while, he kept his dream alive in his heart. He read every book he could find about faraway places. He studied maps, memorizing the names of cities and rivers. He learned about different cultures, different ways of life. He wanted to be ready. He wanted to be prepared for the day he would finally leave, but the road ahead was not easy. His family grew worried. His father tried to talk sense into him. "You need to focus on what's here," he would say. "Dreams don't put food on the table." But the young dreamer would only smile. "Maybe not yet," he would reply. "But one day they will." His father would shake his head, frustration etched into his face. "You're chasing shadows," he would say. "One day you'll see that." But the dreamer held on. He held on through the doubts, through the laughter, through the fear. Because deep down he knew something that no one else understood. He knew that dreams were not just things you imagine in the dark. They were real as the ground beneath his feet. And one day he would prove it to everyone. The dreamer's life continued much the same, but his heart grew restless. He was waiting for something, anything, that would break the cycle. Then, one day, the news spread through the town like wildfire. A traveling merchant had arrived, carrying stories of distant lands and glittering cities. The townspeople gathered to listen, eyes wide with wonder. They had never heard of such things: tall buildings that touched the sky, markets filled with spices and fabrics from every corner of the world. The young dreamer stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding with excitement. His dreams didn't seem so impossible anymore. For the first time, he saw proof that the world outside really existed. It wasn't just a fantasy, it was real. He listened intently as the merchant spoke of grand adventures, of fortunes won and lost, of roads that stretched for miles and never seemed to end. Every word was like a spark, igniting something deep inside him. He knew then that he couldn't stay. He couldn't live his whole life wondering what might have been. He approached the merchant after the crowd had dispersed. "Is it really possible to leave?" he asked, his voice trembling with hope. The merchant looked him over, his eyes sharp and knowing. "If you have the courage," the merchant replied. "The road is not easy, it is filled with danger and hardship. But if your heart is strong, you will make it." The dreamer nodded, his resolve hardening. "I want to go," he said firmly. The merchant smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Then go you shall," he replied. "But be warned, once you leave, there is no turning back." The dreamer felt a chill run through him, but it did not stop him. If anything, it made him want it more. He returned home that night, his mind racing with plans. He would need supplies, maps, a way to travel. He would need courage, strength, and determination. But most of all, he would need belief. Belief that his dreams were not just figments of his imagination. Belief that they were real and worth fighting for. And so he began to prepare. He worked harder than ever, saving every coin, gathering what he could. His family watched with concern, but he could not be swayed. "You're chasing a ghost," his father warned, but the dreamer only smiled. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe I'm chasing my destiny." The day finally came for him to leave. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. He stood at the edge of the town, the road stretching out before him. It was a path filled with uncertainty. His family stood behind him, silent and tense. His father's eyes were hard, his mother's eyes were wet with tears. "You don't have to do this," his father said, his voice firm but trembling. The dreamer turned back to look at them, his eyes filled with determination. "I do," he replied softly. Without another word, he turned and began to walk. His footsteps were heavy, but his heart was light. The first days were simple. The sun shone bright and the path was clear. He slept under the stars, his dreams filled with possibilities. But soon the road grew rough. The weather turned cold, the skies darkened, and the path became harder to follow. Food grew scarce and loneliness settled in, but he pushed forward step by step. His feet ached, his hands blistered, but he did not stop. Every night he would sit by a small fire and look up at the stars. He would remember his dream, his reason for leaving. It kept him going, it kept him strong. Days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months. The road stretched on, winding through mountains and valleys. He met strangers along the way, some kind, some cruel. Some helped him, offering food and shelter. Others tried to steal from him, to take what little he had. But he survived. He learned to fight to protect himself. He learned to trust his instincts and to read the land. The boy from the small town was gone. In his place stood a traveler, hardened and strong. But the road did not get easier. Storms came, fierce and unrelenting. The wind howled like a beast, tearing at his clothes, chilling him to the bone. He would wrap himself in whatever he had, pressing on through the rain and snow. But still, he did not turn back. His dream burned bright, guiding him forward. He could see it sometimes, just beyond the horizon, a glimpse of the life he had always imagined. And that was enough. Enough to keep him moving, enough to keep him alive. The road of trials had tested him, but it had not broken him. If anything, it had made him stronger. The road stretched endlessly before him, but he pressed on. His feet were sore, his clothes were worn, but his spirit remained unbroken. He had learned to survive on little. A crust of bread, a sip of water, and the warmth of a small fire were enough. The mountains grew taller, the valleys deeper. He crossed rivers with currents strong enough to sweep him away. But each challenge he faced made him stronger. Each step brought him closer to the life he had imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he stumbled upon a village. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The buildings were tall and made of stone. The streets were busy with people from every walk of life. Merchants called out, selling goods from distant lands. Musicians played songs that filled the air with joy. He wandered through the streets, eyes wide with wonder. It was as if he had stepped into a dream. The people spoke many languages. They wore clothes of bright colors and fabrics he had never touched. He stopped at a market stall filled with fruits he had never seen. The vendor smiled and offered him one. He bit into it and the flavor burst in his mouth. It was sweet and juicy, like nothing he had ever tasted. "Where did this come from?" he asked, his voice filled with amazement. "From the islands far to the west," the vendor replied with a grin. The dreamer's eyes lit up. "And how do you get there?" he asked eagerly. The vendor pointed to the harbor where great ships were docked. "You sail," he said simply. The young man's heart raced. For the first time, his dream felt within reach. He wandered down to the docks, watching the ships load and unload their cargo. The smell of salt water filled the air. Sailors shouted to one another, their voices rough and strong. Ropes creaked, sails flapped in the wind. He stood there for hours, watching the ships come and go. His heart ached with longing. It was there by the water's edge that he made his decision. He would join them. He would sail to those distant islands, explore new lands, and chase the horizon. The revelation was clear. His journey was not over, it was only beginning. He had crossed the mountains and braved the valleys. Now the sea called his name. With renewed purpose, he set out to find a way aboard. His dream was alive, stronger than ever. The road had tested him, but it had also prepared him. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The ship rocked gently as it cut through the waves. His heart pounded with excitement, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind filled the sails, carrying him farther from home than he had ever imagined. He had done it. He had left. The days aboard the ship were long and hard. He worked alongside the crew, learning the ropes, tying knots, scrubbing the decks. But every task was a step toward his dream. Every sunrise brought him closer to the islands he had only heard about in stories. At night, he would lie on the deck, staring up at the stars. He would trace their patterns, dreaming of what lay ahead. Months passed, and the ship finally docked in a bustling port. The sights and sounds overwhelmed him. Markets filled with spices and silks, colors he had never seen, smells he had never known. His heart swelled with joy and disbelief. He walked the streets, eyes wide with wonder. He had made it. His dream had become reality. He explored the islands, learning their ways, tasting their food, speaking with their people. It was everything he had imagined and more. The mountains were taller, the oceans bluer, the skies wider than he had ever believed possible. He was living his dream. He found work, trading stories for meals, working odd jobs for a place to stay. His spirit was unbreakable, his heart unyielding. Years passed, and the young dreamer became a man. His journey shaped him, his spirit grew stronger, his vision clearer. One day, he stood on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The wind brushed against his face, and he knew it was time. Time to return. Time to show those who doubted him that dreams were real. He booked passage on a ship, his belongings packed with memories and stories. The journey back was long, but his heart was light. When he arrived at the edge of his old town, he paused. The streets were the same, the buildings unchanged. But he was different. He had seen the world, tasted adventure, lived his dream. People stopped and stared as he walked through the town. His clothes were different, his eyes brighter, his stride confident. His family welcomed him with open arms, tears of joy streaming down their faces. His father's eyes were filled with pride. "You did it," his father whispered, voice trembling. "You really did it." The dreamer smiled, his heart full. "I did," he replied softly, "and I'm not done yet." His journey had changed him, but it was only the beginning. His dreams had led him across mountains and oceans. Now they would take him even further. He had returned, but his heart still longed for the horizon. The years passed, but his spirit never dimmed. His travels continued, taking him to distant lands and unknown places. He built a life out of his dreams, a life full of adventure and discovery. He became known as a man who had seen the world. People would gather to hear his stories. Children would sit wide-eyed as he spoke of mountains that scraped the sky and oceans that glittered like jewels. His words carried weight, his stories carried hope. He had become a symbol of what was possible. Those who had once doubted him now listened with admiration. His father would sit proudly in the front row, his eyes glistening with pride. His mother would smile, her heart full, knowing her son had lived the life he dreamed. And the young ones in the town began to dream too. They would gather around him, asking questions, begging for tales of distant lands. He would smile and tell them, "Dream big, dream without fear." He built a school for the children of the town, a place where they could learn about the world beyond their borders. He brought maps and books, teachers and tools. He wanted them to know that dreams were real, that the world was vast and waiting. The school grew, and so did the dreams of the children. They studied hard, inspired by his stories, driven by his example. One by one, they began to leave the town. Some became merchants, some explorers, others scholars. They would write back with stories of their own, tales of lands far away and adventures that stretched across the seas. The dreamer would read their letters with pride, his heart swelling with joy. His legacy was not just in his own journey, it was in theirs. His dream had sparked hundreds of others, each one carrying his spirit forward. He grew older, his hair silver, his steps slower. But his eyes still burned with that same fire. He would sit by his window at night, looking up at the stars, just as he had when he was young. He had lived his dream. He had proved that dreams were real, that destiny was not something you waited for, it was something you chased. One night, as the moon hung high in the sky, he closed his eyes for the last time. His face was calm, his heart at peace. The town mourned his passing, but his spirit lived on. His stories were told for generations, his legacy woven into the very fabric of the town. And every time a child looked out their window and dreamed of faraway places, his spirit was there. Because dreams do not die. They live on in the hearts of those brave enough to chase them. And so his story came to an end, but his legacy lived on. His dream had sparked 1,000 more. He had proven that dreams are not just fantasies. They are promises waiting to be fulfilled. His spirit became part of the town, part of its people, part of its future. The dreamer may have been just one person, but his journey showed that one dream can change the world. And now the question remains, what is your dream? Are you ready to chase it? Remember, the road may be long, the path may be hard, but dreams are worth the journey. Thank you for listening to the story of dream and destiny. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and most importantly, keep moving forward.